Welcome back in for another week of all things Arkansas basketball show. This week, joined by Anthony Christensen. Thank you so much for coming on. It's going to be a really fun week. We've already have lots to talk about. We've honestly been sitting here for the last 15 minutes before we decided to hit the record button, just talking.
Oh, we've been yapping.
So this will be pretty good.
We've been yapping.
We'll try and stay on topic. But
make no promises.
Yes, exactly. No promises. While we are on the topic, though, because, we've been doing this for, 30 seconds as of right now. First thing I think that'd be really fun to talk about, Billy Richmond taking to social media and being like, everybody needs to be in Budwa on this weekend. Let's do a whiteout. Let's get the atmosphere popping. I love that. Like, he's feeding into the energy of the crowd. It's showing the appreciation that the players have for all of the fans, the students, everyone who's making the trek, especially last weekend in the winter storm. I had friends from home, my dad, my mom, everyone that was watching the game. Like, you could not tell that there's a snowstorm outside. There's so many people there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it was fun. It wasn't fun to drive back in, but my car's check engine light came on. It was a whole experience. But no, it was a great environment, especially given the conditions, and obviously it turned out to be a close game. Yeah. And maybe a closer game than you'd probably want against, LSU and that LSU team. And obviously Dayton Thomas was, kind of getting back to what he is in that game. But yeah, I mean, you kind of needed that if you're Arkansas in that game. So it was a good experience overall, I'm sure. And, obviously this weekend it's going to be, that plus some. So yeah, with everything obviously that comes with a Kentucky game and yeah.
Well, this matchup has obviously been elevated since Coach Cal came here, and Coach Kenny Payne came over from Kentucky as well, and then DJ also came. So we were kind of talking about this a little bit before also, but it has to be so weird for these guys. I mean, I don't think there's anyone who's still in Kentucky that DJ necessarily played with, but just the idea of, like, I used to wear that uniform. Like, if there's someone else on that team that wears the same number, like, that was my number for Kentucky. Like, that's so weird. Or Coach Cal knowing that someone else is sitting in his seat on the plane. Like, that was my seat that I sat in for X amount of years when I coached it. Like, that has to be such a weird, even on a broader scale too, like for players that get traded mid-season, that has to be so weird.
Oh, yeah. No, for sure. Like, last year at Rupp Arena post-game, John Calipari, he said he was looking up and he was worried because he felt like they were losing because he was looking at the Kentucky side of the scoreboard, which just was naturally that's and I think he said that Adu Thero said the same thing. So it is weird, especially when you've been there, 15 years and had all the success that he had while he was at Kentucky, and then obviously DJ Wagner was there for his year, and Billy Richmond and Carter Knox were signed to go there when John Calipari first started recruiting Darius Acuff and Malik Thomas. He was recruiting them to Kentucky, not to Arkansas. So there is a lot of overlap, which makes this really interesting. And you look at, the Kentucky side of things, obviously there's not really any holdovers, from that time, but, Mark Pope is, an alum there. So he played at Rupp Arena. He won a national championship there. And he coached there against Cal when he was at Utah Valley. So it's, there's a lot of fun little overlap. Yeah, a lot of fun overlaps. And, that'll make for, I think a really fun game on Saturday. And, it was really fun going to Rupp Arena last year and, covering, the spectacle that was. And I don't think it's going to be, the same spectacle this year as it was last year, just because, it's not the return. It's them coming here. Yeah. And obviously there's been, some more time to digest all of that and everything. But, it'll still be a big time game. It'll be, there's still the emotionally charged aspects of it. So I don't even remember what we said to get started on this, but yeah, it'll be fun.
Well, emotions aside, the things that are going to be going down on the hardwood, sticking with Kentucky focused for right now, this is a team that gets out in transition really, really well. And that's something that Coach Payne talked with us about, talked with the media about. That's one of their biggest strengths. For Arkansas, I feel like something that they've been working on is their defense. So how do you think those two are going to kind of match up, I guess?
I think first when you look at, Kentucky getting out in transition, a lot of that is going to come back to Arkansas's ball security, which I know it's kind of cliche. The best defense is a good offense, but you've got Darius Acuff, who just doesn't turn the ball over all that often. Yep. I think he had 10 assists and no turnovers against Oklahoma, and he's had several games like that this year. But when Kentucky is able to get out in transition, Arkansas has obviously got to be able to get back and defend in transition, and I think that's going to be a big key to the game. And, Kentucky, this past Vanderbilt game aside, which...
Right. That's a burn the tape game.
Yes, as Kenny Payne, as he said, But they had won 5 games in a row and started to really put some things together, and that's despite having lost Jalen Lowe for the whole season. They've been without Cam Williams for a good amount of time. Jaden Quaintance came back for a few games, and now he's dealing with his knee swelling again. So Kentucky's a team that's had to deal with a lot of this stuff, a lot of injuries and a lot of inconsistencies and all of that. But then you get to this most recent stretch of form, Vanderbilt aside. And it seems like they had put some stuff together. And I think a big part of that is, like you said, the transition offense. So, Arkansas getting back and being able to defend in transition, I think is going to be a big aspect of this game.
It's also a team that's very gritty and they fight really hard, especially on the offensive glass. That's another strength that this team brings to the table that I feel like Arkansas has also kind of struggled with, is grabbing those boards and getting in some foul trouble down low. So those are definitely some things that they're going to have to be a little weary of going into the game.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, Arkansas, I think, has done a little bit better with that in the past few games. Obviously a 3-game win streak. 2 of those games are against, the teams that are tied for last place in the SEC. But
those games have been close.
Yes, they've been close. And,
is that
sometimes
concerning?
You need those.
Do you think that's a little worrisome for the fans? I
don't think so.
Okay.
Just because, basketball is just such a random game. Like, you can go and beat Vanderbilt, which is one of the best teams in the country, by 25, and then struggle against LSU in the same week. So, it's there's a lot of randomness to it, and I wouldn't be super concerned about that. Are there concerning aspects of those games? Yes. The first half defense against Oklahoma, especially, I think was a big part of that, and then the rebounding as well. I think is obviously a big part of that. Like against Oklahoma. There was the play that Carter Knox got called for the flagrant foul that probably shouldn't have been one. I don't remember who took the shot, but there was a missed shot, and I think there were 2 or 3 Arkansas players in the paint, and nobody went up for the rebound. Xavier Brown got the rebound and then got the foul. Mm-hmm. So, that's obviously going to be a big-time concern, especially when you're going up against a Kentucky team that has Malachi Moreno or Brandon Garrison, guys who are going to crash the glass and get
who
those
from
kind of
Arkansas
boards.
is going to have to, I guess, step up and stop those guys and get in the way, box out. Who's going to need to have a bigger defensive game and I guess maybe worry more about defense than offense, which kind of sounds weird to say, but if you have somebody who can maybe hone in more on defense and protect the glass, then that could end up helping Arkansas on the offensive side of the court.
I think obviously the first people you're going to think about is Nick Pringle and Malik Ewan, just because those are your 5 guys. Those are the guys who are going to spend most of their time in the paint and going and fighting for those rebounds. I think another guy is Trevin Brazile, just because he's probably the most athletic player on the team, and he can go up and get those. And obviously, he's not necessarily going to be going one-on-one against Brandon Garrison or Malachi Moreno or
right.
Mo Diabate or whoever, but he's still a guy you're going to be relying upon in those moments. And I think he's going to be one of those guys as well. But really, those guys in the front court, and I think that from a rebounding and rim protection standpoint, I think those are definitely the 3 guys I would point to for sure.
All right, now we'll flip it a little bit before we take our first break, talking about offense for Arkansas. And I want to talk about the OU game a little bit because Malik Thomas, the threes weren't falling for him, and that's his bread and butter. But he still had a great game. He was driving hard. He was making great passes. He was doing other things, and I feel like he's learning more about himself as the season goes on, and we're kind of all in the front row seat getting to watch that happen.
Yeah, no, I thought he was spectacular. I thought Darius Acuff, he only spent, I think, 4 minutes on the bench in that game, but in those minutes, Malik Thomas, I thought was really a buoy, if you will, just kind of keeping Arkansas afloat. And, especially in a game like that, when you get down by as many as 13 points, on the road in a hostile environment, you need those kind of performances. And like you said, the threes weren't falling for him, but, he's added a floater to his game. He's become a much better driver than I think a lot of people have realized in recent games. So I think that was a huge reason as to why Arkansas ended up getting over the line in that game. And, he was hitting his free throws as well. He hit the 2 at the end, with a timeout in between. And, he's, I think Coach Cal after the game was like, he's not normal. It's just like, which, out of context is kind of like, maybe, not something you necessarily want to hear about yourself, but, that's kind of what you need in those kind of moments is you need those kind of guys who aren't going to be phased in those moments. And, he was one of the big reasons why they won that game. And obviously, Darius Acuff is going to get all the plaudits, and it's deserved. But, I thought Malik Thomas was, he was huge.
Yeah, and I've talked about this before on previous episodes, but just I guess kind of the shadow that Malik Thomas lives in a little bit with Acuff. Like that has to be a hard position to be in. And Coach Cal has talked about it also with us about how the team understands what kind of player Darius Acuff Jr. is and how special he is. And they're all okay with it because yes, he's taking his shots and he's making sure that he scores and whatever, but he's also contributing and making the team better. And I think as long as Acuff continues to do that, the team will still function really well as a unit. And he's a very unselfish player. He still scores 20 plus points a game. I mean, I think he was having a slower game and he was still, I think, about like 15 points. And everyone's like, where is he? And I'm like, that's still a good showing from your point guard. We're just used to him being an absolute phenom.
Yeah, no, for sure. And you look at those two and just kind of the dynamic they've built. They're the top scoring freshman duo in the country by almost a full 6 points over Keaton Wagler and David Mirkovic over at Illinois, who are, in their own right spectacular. So, I mean, just the way that those two guys have just kind of, fed off of each other and have been really just kind of the catalyst that Arkansas needs on the offensive end has been, really impressive to watch, especially since they've been doing it pretty much since they both arrived on campus. Since, that season opener against Southern, or even if you want to go back to the exhibitions, you can there as well. But yeah, I mean, just the way that those two play together, obviously Darius Acuff is, he's getting a lot more of the attention just because, he's getting, the SEC Freshman of the Week awards. But, yeah, Malik Thomas is right there as well, just in terms of his importance on the team. And I think you've seen that especially recently, starting in modern basketball isn't the biggest deal, but, he gets inserted in the starting lineup and Arkansas is 3-0 in those games. And
but as a freshman, that's a huge confidence boost. Yes. Like, okay, I am doing something right here.
Yeah, absolutely. And, they're 3-0 in those 3 games, and he's averaging, I think it's 14 points in those games. So, I mean, he's obviously Darius Acuff is like up here in terms of the importance, but then, right below, I think you would put Malik Thomas just because of how impactful he has been and, just how important that, those two, their relationship has been to Arkansas's success and just how well they play together.
If you hopped into our conversation, mid-conversation, you'd think we were talking about juniors, maybe seniors. Like, we're talking about freshmen here, and that's so special for this team. And Coach Cal and everybody here understands that, I think.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I asked him after the game on Saturday or Tuesday. God.
Against OU?
Tuesday, yeah, Oklahoma.
All the days blend together.
Yeah, I don't know what day it is. I'm lucky I know what city I'm in. But no, I asked him after the game that, how special is it to have, I'm paraphrasing, but how special is it to have, these two guys, performing as well as they are? And he's just talking about, like, how he's talking to another recruit's mom, and she's just like, I can't believe you get them to play together. And it's just like, well, I've been doing this for a long time. You go down the list of, the great guards that Cal has coached, and, I don't want to say it becomes second nature because there's so much that goes into coaching and building those relationships, but, it's something that he and the staff are used to, and, they've obviously had a lot of success in doing that. And, in an era in which a lot of people are, turning away from freshmen and freshman recruiting, I mean, you got like, some schools saying, yeah, we're just going to focus on, when the portal opens up. This kind of shows that it's still, an option, be it, obviously Arkansas with Darius Acuff and Malik Thomas, but, at Illinois with, Keaton Wagler and David Mirkovic, like we just said, or, at Arizona with Braden Burries and Koa Peets, it shows that there's still a lot of nuance and a lot of different ways you can win in college basketball. And it also obviously shows just how good and special those two players are.
100%. Lots more to talk about with Anthony after the break. Stick with us. All right, welcome back. We're talking more hoops. I feel like we've pretty much talked about everything possible Arkansas basketball so far.
We've covered it all.
But we're talkers.
All basketball.
So we're going to figure out how to talk even more.
All basketball, all weather, all Family Feud. I mean, we've got it all. I got it in, but yeah.
All right, well, first we're going to talk about keys to the game for Arkansas against Kentucky this weekend. I think one of them kind of just has to be maintaining the discipline. There's a lot of hype around this game. We talked about it. This series, this matchup has been elevated since Coach Cal came here from Kentucky. So the players staying locked in, being disciplined, especially on defense. Again, we were just harping on that, especially down low.
Yeah, no, for sure. You get to, there's still the emotions attached to this game, like we mentioned earlier, and obviously all of that. The defense down low is going to be huge. Like we mentioned, I also think, and we mentioned this earlier as well, I think ball security is going to be huge in this game. On both ends. I mean, Kentucky's offense has been pretty turnover prone in SEC games, and Arkansas's defense has been pretty good at forcing turnovers, which hasn't necessarily been a huge plus for the rest or for most of the season. But then you look at Arkansas's offense. It's been a little bit more turnover prone in SEC play than it had been throughout the rest. And Kentucky's defense has been really good at forcing turnovers. So, and it kind of goes back to the transition points like we mentioned earlier. But I think that's going to be a huge part of it. And obviously some of that also comes down to, the rim protection and rebounding and all of that to prevent those, I guess, transition opportunities.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I think another big one is sticking with that too is rim protection, but also matching physicality. And I think since Arkansas entered SEC play, they've done a much better job. And Coach Cal talked to us about it. Like some of their big guys are being a little too timid for being a big guy, and you have to be. Not to keep bringing up the name, but it got to be more like Darius Acuff. Like he just puts his head down and he drives to the hoop and he bullies his way there, and no one's stopping him. And Coach Cal was saying that some of the bigger players kind of have to embody that as well. So I think also matching a very physical Kentucky team is going to be crucial also.
Yeah, for sure. And, matching the physicality has been a big key in a lot of these games, right? I mean, you go back to the Tennessee game, obviously, Tennessee has built a reputation of being, one of the more physical teams in the country. And Arkansas did a great job in that game of matching the physicality or even bettering the physicality there. You go to, Ole Miss, obviously another, hard-nosed defense-first physical team. And they, for the most part in that game, took care of it. Auburn, not so much. But I think that's, a lot of that is matching the physicality, being physical without fouling. You don't want to give away too many, opportunities for Kentucky to get free points. And yeah, I think you look at, the Tennessee game, I think is probably where you look at first for Arkansas with regard to matching or bettering physicality. And then, I think you can also take some lessons from the Kentucky game against Tennessee, obviously I think it was last week, 2 weeks ago. I don't know. The days, who knows where we are. But, I thought that Kentucky did a good job of that game on the road of, matching and bettering the physicality against Tennessee. So I think there are lessons to be learned from that. And I think that you can, look at that game and maybe see, because Tennessee also had some success in that game as well. Kentucky had to come back and win that game. So I think you can, look at that game and maybe take some, I guess, lessons, if you will, from both sides of that to see, where Kentucky had the success versus where you can maybe, I guess, exploit some things. And yeah, if I remember correctly, I think Tennessee led by as many as 16 points.
Okay.
It was certainly double figures. I don't know if that's the exact number, but yeah, I think that, for sure is a big part of it for sure.
What other keys to the game? There we go. Do you think that Arkansas is going to need to bring to the table to get it done Saturday?
Yeah, I think the point guard matchup is going to be huge. Winning that area, you've got, obviously Jalen Lowe is out for the season, so Kentucky's kind of been in a weird little point guard by committee kind of situation. Otega always had some reps there. For the most part, it's been Denzel Aberdeen.
Yep.
You've had
he makes some big time shots, and when he's rolling, that team is elite.
Yeah, for sure. So I think for the most part, it's going to be Denzel Aberdeen, and I think for Arkansas, it's going to be how well does Darius Acuff do against his pressure? Because when he was at Florida last season, and he was coming off the bench and being a big part of, a national championship winning team, a lot of that was, his on-ball pressure. It was his defense and everything like that. And obviously he can hurt you on the offensive end as well. But, when you think of Denzel Aberdeen, you think mostly about his defense. So, and Darius Acuff has played against, guys of, high-level defensive caliber before, not to keep bringing up the Tennessee game, but Jacoby Gillespie is a guy who's been around the block. He's been in college. I think this is it's either his true senior year or his fifth year in college.
Okay.
He had done it at a lot of different levels. Started at Belmont and then went to Maryland and then to Tennessee. So Darius Acuff's had success against guys like that. So I think it's, being able to get around his Denzel Aberdeen's, on ball pressure and just kind of taking care of that, and also keeping him in check as well, just because he is a guy who can hurt you on the offensive end, and obviously that extends into Otega Owe as well, just because he was the preseason SEC Player of the Year, and obviously, he was a guy who stayed in the draft process a long time and probably would have been picked in the second round if he had stayed in. So, I mean, he's a guy who's, a high quality player. So, yeah, point guard play, I think, is going to be a huge key for both teams.
It'll be a fun matchup to watch go down in Bud Walton Arena. Wow, I can't speak. It'll be a fun matchup to watch go down in Bud Walton Arena.
We don't know where we are. We don't know what day it is.
We're a mess. But regardless, you should stick with us after the break just one more time. All right, back for one more. Anthony's one of the funniest people. If you ever get the chance to talk to him, please take the time to, because he's hilarious.
I'll take it.
We got a couple minutes for our last segment here. So first, I guess, rapid fire question. Who's an NBA player that you would say that Darius reminds you of?
Oh, wow. Okay.
I told you. I asked if you wanted to know the question beforehand, and you said, no, I want to be put on the spot.
That is a good question. It's tough to say, just because he has a pretty unique skill set in that he can play both on the ball and off the ball.
Mm-hmm.
So, and obviously he hasn't played with, but he's worked a lot with Tyler Ulis. So I think my mind immediately jumped to Devin Booker, but that doesn't really feel like a super great comparison. But yeah, I don't know why. I mean, Devin Booker is, among my favorite players in the NBA. So maybe that's just, whenever I think about players in the NBA I think of Devin Booker. So maybe that's why I thought of him immediately. But
why is he your favorite player?
I just think he's awesome. I think I love watching him play. I think, he's good with the ball in his hands. He's a great shooter. I think he's a really underrated on-ball defender as well. But yeah, I think, when you look at, there are some similarities, and not just that they're John Calipari coached guards, but, obviously they can both shoot. They're both capable with the ball in their hands. They're both capable of playing off the ball, but, it's not a great comparison. I don't think. It's just
it's
the
okay.
first guy who came to mind.
We can come back with another one. I'll give you some time to think about it.
Okay.
And then last question. You get to travel a lot for work. You've been covering the Hogs. What would you say is your favorite college town you've gone to?
Favorite college town I've gone to. Now, when doing this, I always exclude Fayetteville and Columbia, Missouri, because I went to Mizzou, and obviously I live in Fayetteville, so I don't want to. I leave out all places with implicit biases.
Okay.
So obviously I love both those places. I love Knoxville. I last year got to go to the game there, and Thompson Bowling, and Tennessee was ranked number 1 at the time as well, so that obviously is going to play into it. But I loved just the city. I loved Thompson Bowling Arena. It was a great game day environment. I just really enjoyed walking around the campus. I loved that it's right there on the river and everything, and all of that. But yeah, so I think in terms of the SEC towns I've been to, I think Knoxville, again with the caveat, is probably my favorite, and I'll get to check off the rest, come the end of basketball
What ones
season.
have you not gone to?
Gainesville.
Okay.
Let me see if I can do this off the top of my head. Starkville, Tuscaloosa. There's 1 or 2 more.
That's good though. That's a lot.
I'm pulling up the schedule.
Okay, while you do that, I remember when Evan and Trey went to the football game against Tennessee. They got to travel for us for that, and they did a live shot on one of the boats in the river.
Oh, yeah.
And Evan was terrified. They both did a great job. You would not be able to tell, but Evan texted me after, and he was like, "You would never you would never know how terrified I was during that whole time. Like I thought I was gonna fall in. I was like, it's a river. It's not. It can't be that wavy.
It's like, whoa. I mean, I don't know. I'm
Maybe I'm wrong. I
I'm
haven't
not a
been,
river
so I
expert.
can't say. But
I'm not a river expert, so I wouldn't get into the Mississippi or Missouri rivers.
No.
Yeah, I grew up in the St. Louis area, so I mean those are the closest ones to me. But I wouldn't get in. So I mean, I can understand the fear. I think.
I drove through St. Louis on my trip here.
God's favorite city.
Yeah, it was cool. I mean, we
That's
stopped
the
there. We
best.
went to the Arch, and then
Okay, did you go in?
yeah, we went in. We went all the way up and then
Sensational.
all the way back down. Yeah, it was really cool.
Yeah.
And everything here is so flat, so you can see for
can see,
miles
yeah,
as long
I
as
could
it's
see
not
my
foggy or
house.
anything.
Like,
Yeah,
oh,
probably.
they're
Like,
in.
oh, that must
was
be
allowed,
Fayetteville
but
over
yeah.
there. So-
but
okay, so
Now-
do you have the schedule up? Have
I
you
do.
Found
Yes.
the other ones
Okay.
you haven't
So
gone to?
I haven't been to Starkville. I've not been to Tuscaloosa. I've not been to Gainesville.
Okay.
I think is that it? It might be it.
Okay.
Because
is that?
going into the season, I hadn't been to Oxford. I've been there now.
Mhm.
I hadn't been to Norman. I've been there now. So yeah, I think those are the last ones.
That's pretty good. You're going to
from
be able
the
to knock
SEC.
almost all
Yeah.
those off.
So I will get to. I'll have checked off all the SEC times
Wow.
after this.
We'll have to
basketball
check back in,
season.
I guess, at the
Yes.
end of the season, and then we'll find out which one's the best.
Yes, but then I guess just in general, from my time in college, I got to cover a game at Allen Fieldhouse at Kansas, and that place is, it's incredible. And then my first job, I was in Evansville, Indiana, and I was covering Evansville and Southern Indiana, the two schools there. And Southern Indiana played at Duke, so I got to go to Cameron Indoor Stadium, and that place, just incredible.
Rockin'.
So I've been
Yep.
incredibly fortunate. Like I don't know what I did to deserve to get to go to the places I've been to, but
You worked hard,
Yeah.
and now you're where you are now.
I'll take
In
it.
the PTN
Yeah.
studio.
I'll take it.
Anthony,
Now, where's
thanks.
your favorite place?
I've only traveled to Baton Rouge and Dallas so far, so I feel like
Dallas it is.
yeah, yeah, I might have to go with Dallas on that one for now. But I'm looking forward to going back. I believe I'm going back for baseball for their opening weekend, so that'll be fun to cover that.
That will be fun.
And be there for a little bit longer than like 24 hours and working the whole time. Maybe get to
That's
explore
fair,
the
yeah.
city a little bit. So that should be fun.
Yes.
Anthony, thanks so much for joining us. This was really fun.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.